The billionaire sat motionless in his grand leather chair, eyes half closed as if asleep. Just a few steps away, the massive safe stood wide open, overflowing with bundles of cash, more wealth than most people could ever imagine. His breathing stayed steady, every muscle still, as he quietly observed. Little Arya, only 6 years old, walked into the office holding her mother Lena's hand. For the past 2 years, Lena had worked the night shifts here, and during school breaks, her daughter often came along. To make her feel useful, Lena had given her a pair of tiny pink gloves, which Arya wore proudly. The billionaire had set this up deliberately. After discovering that his business partner had stolen millions from him, his trust in people had shattered. Despite building an empire at 45, doubt gnawed at him. Was there anyone truly honest left in the world? Tonight's test would tell him. While Lena quietly dusted the shelves, Arya's gaze wandered toward the gaping safe. Her eyes widened in awe at the mountain of bills, curiosity drawing her closer. The billionaire held his breath, convinced he was about to witness another disappointment. But what she did next stunned him. Arya didn't reach for the money. Instead, she gently began to tidy the stacks, straightening them and arranging them neatly as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Her small hands moved carefully, almost reverently. "Mommy," she whispered, "the billionaire's money was messy. I fixed it like you taught me with our coins at home." Lena spun around in alarm. "Arya, you mustn't. Don't touch the boss's things," Lena scolded quickly. "But it was messy, Mom," Arya whispered, her little face sincere. "He'll be happy when he wakes up and sees everything tidy." The billionaire felt something stir inside him that he hadn't felt in years. His throat tightened, his chest heavy with an emotion he could barely name. This small child, who likely had never held more than a few bills in her life, had chosen to organize a fortune rather than take even a single note. And she had spoken about it with the innocent honesty of someone with nothing to hide. What the billionaire didn't yet realize was that this simple act of truth from a 6-year-old girl would ignite a chain of events that would forever alter his life, challenge his beliefs, and uncover lessons about prejudice, kindness, and the true worth of people in ways he could never have imagined. If you wonder how a child could teach life lessons to a man of vast wealth, stay close and subscribe, because this journey of transformation was only beginning, and the road ahead would reveal that the greatest lessons often come from the most unexpected places. In the weeks that followed, the billionaire continued to quietly observe Lena and little Arya. He noticed how Lena worked tirelessly, cleaning his company offices at night, and then heading to a doctor's clinic in the mornings to scrub and polish again. Arya was always by her side, sometimes doing her homework in the corner, sometimes playing silently as her mother worked without pause. What struck him most wasn't the hard work, but the way Lena raised her daughter. "We always return what isn't ours, even if no one sees," he overheard her tell Arya gently one evening. "Our honesty is worth more than any money." Lena's story slowly unfolded before his eyes. She had grown up in foster care after losing her parents at the age of 9, struggled through school while working odd jobs, and never had the chance to afford college. At 22, she gave birth to Arya, only to be abandoned by the father who fled upon hearing the news. Since then, Lena had carried every burden alone, refusing to accept handouts or pity, determined to live with dignity. Moved in ways he could not explain, the billionaire quietly ordered a salary increase for Lena, instructing the payroll department to justify it as a category adjustment. But good deeds, even in silence, rarely go unnoticed. And soon, the wrong eyes began to watch. Richard Blackwood, the company's vice president of operations, was a man in his 50s who had never known struggle. Born into wealth, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed privilege was his birthright. During a board meeting, he raised his voice with a mocking laugh. "Billionaire, why are we wasting extra money on cleaning staff, especially that one employee? She's an excellent professional." The billionaire replied firmly. "Excellent," Richard sneered. "You need to understand where these people belong. Give them an extra coin, and soon they'll be demanding the whole vault. It's in their nature." The billionaire felt anger coil inside him, but he kept his composure. Richard, the son of one of the company's founders, owned a large share of the business. His prejudice had long been tolerated because of his financial weight, but each word made the billionaire's jaw tighten. "And another thing," Richard pressed on, "that woman brings her child here. What kind of mother exposes a little girl to a workplace? Clearly, she doesn't come from a proper family structure." That evening, the billionaire's anger reached a boiling point. He stayed late and witnessed something he would not forget. In the dim hallway, Richard confronted Lena as she finished her duties. "Listen carefully," he hissed. "I know you're being paid more than you deserve. I don't know what kind of favors you're offering, but it ends now." Lena's face went pale. "Sir, I don't understand." "Of course you don't," Richard spat. "People like you never do. You take what you're given, and you keep quiet. And get that child out of here. This is not a daycare." Arya shrank behind her mother, terrified by his harsh tone. Lena bent protectively, pulling her close. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "Your job," Richard snapped, "is to clean and to stay invisible. Nothing else." From his office doorway, the billionaire watched every word, every gesture. His fists clenched, and for the first time in years, he felt a burning anger, not the cold fury of business rivalries, but a deep, purifying rage. Richard had crossed a line. Not only had he insulted a hard-working mother, but he had also dared to frighten an innocent child. A child who had shown more honesty and dignity than most adults the billionaire had ever met. That night, the billionaire made a choice. Watching from the shadows was no longer enough. Richard Blackwood had shown his true colors, and now it was time to act. What Richard didn't realize was that every word of his venomous tirade had been captured by the very security system he had once insisted on installing to monitor employees. Now, it was his own cruelty that the cameras preserved. But the billionaire wanted more than a hidden recording. He wanted Richard to expose himself, to destroy his own reputation so thoroughly that no boardroom or social circle would ever welcome him again. What had begun as silent observation was now transforming into a carefully laid plan, not only to protect Lena and Arya, but to use Richard's arrogance as the very weapon that would undo him. With each new humiliation Richard hurled, something awakened inside the billionaire, an old fire, a thirst for justice that had been buried under years of wealth and detachment. Now it burned with purpose. Richard thought himself untouchable, but he had no idea that he was already writing his own downfall. The next morning, the billionaire picked up his phone. "Marcus, I need your services again." On the other end, Marcus Chun, a former FBI investigator and corporate crime expert, raised an eyebrow. The two had worked together during the embezzlement scandal that had nearly cost the company millions. "What kind of trouble this time?" Marcus asked. "The kind that reeks of racism and abuse of power," the billionaire replied coldly. "I need solid evidence against Richard Blackwood." Marcus chuckled darkly. "That spoiled heir? This'll be easier than stealing candy from a baby. Men like him always leave trails." Meanwhile, Richard doubled down on his campaign against Lena. On Monday, he stormed into Human Resources, waving a paper in Sandra Miller's face, the director of HR, and a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s. "This employee has been arriving late repeatedly," he declared. "And that child she drags here is disruptive to the workplace." Sandra frowned. She had worked with Lena for years and knew her record was spotless. "Mr. Blackwood, I'll need to review the logs." "She's never been late, as far as I've seen." "Logs can be altered," Richard snapped, arrogance dripping from every word. "I'm the vice president. My word should be enough." What Richard didn't realize was that every second of this conversation was being recorded. The surveillance system he once boasted about had now become a silent witness to his lies. By Wednesday, his cruelty had escalated. Lena and Arya had just arrived for the night shift when Richard intercepted them in the parking lot, blocking their path. "Listen carefully," he hissed, leaning in too close. "I know you're not just cleaning to earn that extra cash. What else are you offering?" Lena froze, trembling with outrage and fear. "Sir, what you're implying?" "I'm implying that people like you always have a price." Richard cut her off, smirking. "And I'd like to know what yours is." Arya clutched her mother's hand, whispering, "Mummy, why is that man being so mean?" Lena knelt and pulled her daughter close, her voice calm but firm. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Some adults are so unhappy they try to hurt others. But we won't let them." Richard's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Unhappy? I have more money in my wallet than you two will see in your entire lives. You people get a little comfort and suddenly think you belong here. That's dangerous." That night, the billionaire sat in his office, his jaw clenched as he replayed the footage over and over. His fury was controlled, precise, and growing stronger with every second. Marcus soon arrived with a preliminary dossier on Richard, and it was exactly what the billionaire had suspected. The mask of the privileged executive was about to crack. The billionaire now had the full picture. Richard Blackwood wasn't just a prejudiced executive. He was a predator who had built a career on humiliating the vulnerable. Marcus laid the documents across the desk, each page darker than the last. 3 lawsuits, Marcus explained. All the same story. Black employees, Latino employees. He bullies them, spreads rumors, pushes them until they quit. Then, Daddy swoops in, pays off the silence, and transfers him to a new playground. Richard Blackwood is a parasite in a suit. The billionaire studied every word carefully, his jaw tightening. Marcus, I want everything. Calls, emails, private chats, his social media, his behavior patterns. Leave nothing out. Marcus tilted his head. So you're planning something big? I'm planning justice, the billionaire answered. That Thursday, Sandra Miller from HR approached him quietly. Sir, we need to talk. Richard is pushing me to fire Lena, but I can't find a single valid reason. He claims she's breaking rules, but there's no proof. Yesterday, he even suggested that people like her shouldn't be in administrative areas after hours. The billionaire's eyes narrowed. People like her? Sandra hesitated. I believe he's crossing into discrimination, sir. That was all the confirmation he needed. Sandra, if you suspect that, document everything. Officially, start an internal investigation. Don't worry, I'll take responsibility. That night, Phase 2 began. The billionaire ordered additional microphones installed in every corridor where Richard liked to corner and intimidate staff. Officially, it was a security upgrade. In reality, it was a trap. The first bait paid off quickly. On Friday night, thinking himself alone, Richard made a phone call. Through the audio feed, the billionaire heard every word. Dad, it's that situation we talked about, Richard muttered. Yes, the black cleaning lady. She's becoming a problem. I need you to use your contacts to create legal trouble for her. Theft, false paperwork, anything that forces her out. Richard, don't you think you're overreacting? His father's voice replied. She's just a cleaning lady. It's about principle, Richard snapped. If we let people like her get too comfortable, soon they'll be demanding rights they don't deserve. We need to stop this before others start getting ideas. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, cold satisfaction settling in. Richard had just confessed to conspiracy, racism, and abuse of power, all on tape. By Monday, Marcus returned with even more. He opened a briefcase, spreading screenshots across the desk. Look at this. Private social media accounts, closed chat groups. Richard posts things that are basically supremacist manifestos. Jokes about black workers, mocking Latino accents, and more. He even used his father's influence to block minority candidates from being hired at other firms. This isn't new. It's a 15-year pattern. The billionaire scanned one screenshot, his face hardening. Richard had typed, "Need to keep those monkeys in their place. Only way to deal with them is to show who's boss from day one." Marcus, he said quietly. This is gold. Wait, there's more. Marcus continued. He's planning something against Lena this week. I intercepted messages. He's arranging a staged theft. The billionaire froze. Explain. He's going to plant something expensive in her supplies. A Rolex. Then he'll discover it, call the police, and humiliate her in front of everyone. The billionaire's face went pale for a moment, then hardened like steel. Richard had no idea who he was up against. He thought he was preying on a powerless woman and her child. He was walking straight into a cage built just for him. The billionaire allowed a smile that carried no warmth. Perfect. Let him try. The higher he climbs on his arrogance, the harder the fall will break him. Tuesday arrived. and Richard executed his cruel little plan with smug precision. At 8 o'clock sharp, Lena and Arya entered the building for their shift. Richard had already slipped a $15,000 Rolex into the cleaning cart. Perfect, Richard muttered to himself, watching through the cameras. Give her 15 minutes, then I'll catch her red-handed. What he didn't know was that the billionaire was upstairs, watching him on high-resolution monitors, every angle covered. And outside, Marcus Chun sat in a van bristling with recording equipment, ready to capture the downfall of a man who had spent his life believing he was untouchable. Outside the building, 3 investigative journalists waited with their cameras ready, each one quietly briefed by the billionaire himself. Marcus, he just planted the watch, the billionaire said over the radio. Activate all recordings. Confirmed, Marcus replied. Extra cameras are live. We've got angles he doesn't even know exist. At exactly 8:20, Richard descended with 2 security guards, his face full of fake politeness. Lena was dusting near the window, while Arya worked on her homework at the table. Mrs. Lena, Richard said, his tone dripping with false courtesy. We've had reports of missing valuables. I'll need to inspect your cleaning cart. Lena froze, confused. Sir, I don't understand. It's standard procedure. Richard lied smoothly, walking straight to the cart where he had planted the Rolex. With a dramatic flourish, he pulled it out. Well, what do we have here? A $15,000 watch missing from the president's office yesterday. Lena went pale. I've never seen that in my life. Of course not, Richard sneered. It just appeared in your supplies, right? Arya stood quickly, fear in her little voice. Mommy, what's happening? Be quiet, child. Richard barked cruelly. Your mother has to explain how stolen items magically appear in her things. One guard dialed the police. Yes, theft in progress. But before the lie could spread, the billionaire appeared at the doorway. He wasn't alone. Marcus walked beside him, followed by 3 strangers Richard didn't immediately recognize. Richard, the billionaire said calmly, I think you should hang up that phone. Richard's smile returned, arrogant and smug. Perfect timing. We just caught your maid stealing your Rolex. The billionaire laughed, a sharp, cold sound that silenced the room. My Rolex? Richard, I've worn nothing but an Apple Watch for 5 years. I've never owned a Rolex. Richard's confidence cracked. What? That's not. I'm saying the billionaire cut him off. We have you on video planting that watch yourself. Purchased this morning. Receipt and all. Marcus stepped forward, holding a tablet. He swiped across the screen. Angle 1, he said, showing crystal clear footage of Richard slipping the watch into the cart. Swipe. Angle 2. Swipe again. Angle 3, your face in full view, checking if the coast was clear. Richard's lips moved soundlessly, but before he could speak, the billionaire gestured. Oh, but there's so much more. Marcus projected files onto a portable screen. First came Richard's private messages, racist slurs, mockery, ugly jokes. Marcus read one aloud. Need to keep those monkeys in their place. Lena gasped, covering her mouth. Then came the audio recordings. Richard plotting with his father to fabricate charges against her. Jennifer Walsh, one of the waiting journalists, stepped forward, microphone in hand. Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News. Mr. Blackwood, how do you respond to evidence of racial discrimination and conspiracy to frame an employee? Richard's face drained of color. You can't use that. I have rights. Of course, the billionaire replied icily. You have the right to remain silent, because everything you say will be used against you by the police already on their way, by the press, by the board of this company, and by Lena's lawyers. Marcus kept scrolling. 3 lawsuits suppressed by your father. 8 employees harassed until they quit. 15 years of systematic abuse. And let's not forget your parking lot threats and your disgusting advances toward Lena, all recorded. Another journalist raised a camera. Mr. Blackwood, how do you answer accusations that you used your power to persecute minority employees for years? Richard bolted toward the exit, but Marcus blocked his path. Oh, I almost forgot, Marcus said with a cold grin. Your accounts were frozen an hour ago. Your father has been shown the evidence, and the board has scheduled an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to terminate you for cause and with legal action to follow. Richard's knees buckled. For the first time in his pampered life, the walls were closing in, and this time, Daddy's money couldn't buy him out. Diana, who had been frozen in shock throughout the entire confrontation, finally found her voice. Mr. Mitchell, did you know all of this was going to happen? The billionaire turned to her with calm honesty. Diana, I always knew Richard carried prejudice in his heart, but I never imagined he would sink so low as to destroy you with fabricated evidence. When I discovered his plan, I decided it was time to stop being a silent witness. Enough was enough. Jasmine, her small hands clutching her homework notebook, walked timidly toward him. Mr. Thomas, will the bad man stop scaring Mommy now? The billionaire knelt to meet her at eye level, his voice warm but steady. No, sweetheart. He will never bother your mother again. Richard, pale and trembling, made one last desperate attempt to bargain. Thomas, listen, we can settle this like gentlemen. My family still holds significant investments in this company. If you... Correction. The billionaire cut him off sharply. Until 20 minutes ago, your family did hold shares. The board voted unanimously to force a buyout. Your family fortune is gone. You've managed to destroy not only your own career, but your family's legacy too. Congratulations. At that moment, the police burst into the office. But it wasn't Diana they reached for. Richard Blackwood, Detective Harris announced firmly, you're under arrest for conspiracy to fabricate evidence, harassment, racial discrimination, and attempted defamation. As the cuffs snapped around his wrists, Richard turned to glare at Diana, his mask finally gone. This won't stand. My family has power. You'll see. Marcus stepped forward, voice like steel. Correction again. Until this morning, maybe. Every major media outlet already has the evidence. Your father called 2 hours ago. He asked to have the Blackwood name removed from every company contact. Even he has abandoned you. The third journalist stepped closer to Diana, microphone raised. Ms. Jefferson, how does it feel to be vindicated, to know the truth is finally out and your persecutor will face justice? Diana looked at Jasmine, then at the man who had stood beside her when no one else would. Tears blurred her vision, but her voice was steady. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that there are still people willing to fight for justice even when silence would have been easier. The billionaire watched Richard being led away, handcuffed, defeated, and utterly disgraced. His career was over, his family fortune gone, his reputation in ruins. In business circles, the story of his fall would become a legendary warning. "Diana," the billionaire said with a small smile, "how would you feel about a promotion?" Through her tears, Diana managed to laugh softly. Jasmine clapped her hands in delight, though she didn't fully understand. In that moment, justice had been served so completely it would be remembered for generations. A reminder that underestimating integrity and decency can be the costliest mistake of all. 6 months later, Diana Jefferson walked the polished halls of Mitchell Enterprises, not as a cleaning lady, but as Director of Human Resources, a position created especially for her. The billionaire had discovered she once studied business, but never finished her degree because of financial struggles. Now, her brilliance had a place to shine. Her first initiative as director was a scholarship program for employees' children. Jasmine, its very first beneficiary, now attended the city's best private school. "Mommy, can I show Mr. Thomas my new drawing?" Jasmine asked one afternoon, rushing into her mother's office with crayons still in hand. "Of course, sweetheart," Diana said, smiling proudly. Jasmine's drawing showed a courtroom with a little girl holding her mother's hand and a man in a suit standing beside them. "I'm going to be a lawyer one day," she announced proudly, "so I can help people just like Mr. Thomas helped us." The billionaire, standing by the window, smiled quietly. He had seen their lives transform. His company, too, had changed. Mitchell Enterprises had become a national model for inclusion and diversity, winning awards and recognition. The Fair Chance program, born from Diana's story, had already given new opportunities to over 200 families. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood's reality was nothing short of ruin. After serving 18 months in prison, he walked out to a world that no longer wanted him. His reputation was toxic. No respected firm would even consider his resume. His wife had divorced him, taking what little remained of his wealth. He lived in disgrace, a living reminder of what prejudice, arrogance, and cruelty could cost. And Diana, she rose every day knowing she had turned pain into strength, not just for herself and Jasmine, but for countless others who would now be given the fair chance she had once been denied. His children had long since abandoned him, changing their last name and refusing to acknowledge his existence. The man who once signed contracts worth millions as a corporate vice president now spent his days selling used cars, earning less in a year than Diana earned in just 3 months. Every time he tried to rebuild his image, his old racist posts resurfaced online, circulating like shadows that refused to let him escape. One evening, at the dinner table in the new house the billionaire had bought for them, Jasmine looked up with her bright, curious eyes. "Dad Thomas," she said softly, "our teacher asked us to write about our heroes. Can I write about you?" The billionaire felt tears prick his eyes as he tried to hold back emotion. "Sweetheart," he whispered, "the real hero of this story is your mother. She taught you, and all of us, that honesty is worth more than any amount of money." Diana reached across the table and took his hand gently. "No, Thomas. The hero is the one who had the courage to stand up when it would have been easier to look away." The following week, Thomas received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Mitchell," the voice said, "this is Michael Torres from CNN. We'd like to do a feature on how your company became a national model for inclusion and diversity after the Blackwood case." The story aired during prime time. Viewers saw Jasmine laughing as she played in the office where everything had begun, Diana confidently managing her department, and the billionaire explaining how a 6-year-old girl had reshaped his understanding of justice and humanity. Across town, Richard watched the report from his small one-bedroom apartment, a glass of cheap whiskey in hand. He saw the life he had lost, thriving without him, stronger than ever. Desperate, he tried to call his old colleagues, but they had blocked his number. He created new social media profiles, only to watch his past resurface again and again, his hateful words chasing him like digital ghosts. 3 years later, at Jasmine's 10th birthday party, the billionaire made a special announcement. Standing before friends, family, and colleagues, he spoke with a trembling voice. "Jasmine, Diana, you have changed my life in ways I can never repay. That is why today, I am creating the Jasmine Jefferson Educational Fund, a scholarship program that will provide opportunities to talented young Black students for the next 50 years. Jasmine threw her arms around him, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you for believing in us when no one else did." That very same day, Richard was begging for work at a small gas station. But the manager typed his name into Google, saw the infamous article about racial discrimination, and shook his head. Richard was turned away once again. His downfall had been so public, so complete, that it became a business school case study on how arrogance and prejudice can destroy even the most powerful careers. The billionaire eventually came to a realization. True revenge had never been about Richard's ruin. It was about building something greater than hatred could ever destroy. He had turned his company into a national symbol of social justice, given opportunities to hundreds of families, and proved that integrity creates lasting prosperity. "The honesty of a child taught me," he said years later during a Harvard lecture, "that the best response to hatred is love combined with action." Richard tried to drag us down, but in the end, he lifted us to heights he never dreamed we could reach. Today, Jasmine was preparing for Harvard herself, after excelling at her prep school. Diana had earned her MBA and was celebrated nationwide for her groundbreaking innovations in human resources. The billionaire had been honored by the government for his work in promoting racial equality in the corporate world. And Richard? He still lived alone, moving from one odd job to the next, his name remembered only as a cautionary tale of what happens when pride and prejudice collide with justice and human decency. In the end, true justice wasn't Richard's imprisonment, nor his financial ruin. It was the living proof that kindness backed by courage creates legacies that inspire generations. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now to hear more stories that remind us all doing good is always worth it, even when it seems impossible.